Next up, Leading the Expansion Era, moderated by Chuck Baker. Chair, Entertainment, Sports and Media, Sidley Austin, LLP.
And right on time. It's good to be here with everybody, terrific panelists here, each of whom has led or is leading expansion teams across women's leagues. We've talked about investment in women's sports, the growth of some of the earlier stage leagues. So let's talk about expansion. A number of us are either directly involved with or closely following the potential sale and perhaps relocation of the Connecticut Sun. We've been fortunate enough, Jennifer, I'll take this to you, to work with you and Monarch Collective on your team. I suspect you had a late night last night. I'm curious, what convinced you and the NWSL, for that matter, that now is a good time to re-enter the Boston market?
Thanks, Chuck, and thanks to Sportico for having me here today. I'll go into why I had a late night last night in a moment, but to answer your question, I guess I'll start out from the league's perspective. Why? I can't speak for the league certainly, but I would imagine that the league shares my belief that no professional sports league is really complete without Boston, and of course Boston was one of the original teams in the league, and what a great opportunity to write the next chapter in women's professional soccer in Boston. And from our perspective, I am a born and raised Bostonian. So are my co-founders have lived for decades in the city. And we start out, we think about our city, and it's a city of champions. There's an incredibly passionate fan base in the city. So, and then the next thing we did is we engaged the Sports Innovation Lab, and we put out a survey to 1,000 respondents, and the data showed that in our market there was an above average interest in soccer, an above average interest in women's professional sports, and an above average interest in women's soccer. Probably another good data point for the Connecticut Sun, perhaps, depending on what happens there. But in any case, so we had the fans, and we had the market, and you look across what's the landscape of women's sports. It was a very different landscape from when the Breakers stopped playing in Boston. So much growth all across the country. You could see the viewership, attendance. Product was always excellent. Product in women's sports has always been world class. But just the growth of the fan base and the opportunities and the interest of sponsors, it convinced us that the time was right. And I guess then what we did next was try to think about, learn the lessons from what happened before. I mean, there's a lot of good news stories from the Breakers. Some of the best players in the world in the sport played a portion of their career in Boston. And there's still a very loyal, passionate supporter base in the city. But, with this landscape, what could we do to build a long-term sustainable foundation? And, one of the things that we focused on right away was making sure we had a designated home. That wasn't the case for the Breakers. They bounced around. We were going to have a stadium in the heart of the city. And we have this, we partnered with the city of Boston, an incredible partnership where we are renovating White Stadium in Franklin Park in the heart of the city. My late night was because we just yesterday closed, I think, probably the biggest loan directed towards professional sports to finance the stadium in excess of $100 million.
Congrats.
Woo! Thank you. So I'm going on an hour's sleep, so I hope I'm coherent. But in any case, I mean, that in itself, I think, really is an incredible, data point and demonstration of what is going on in women's sports, and that investors and financial institutions alike have recognized that there's long-term sustainable growth, and we can direct dollars towards it. And I guess the last thing I will say, in terms of laying our long-term foundation was, who is a part of my partnership, my investor group. And we have, I think one of the keys to launching an expansion team really is not just knowing your market, but the strength of your network in that market and the strength of the ownership group's ties to that market, which I led off with that, our decades of time in Boston. And, we built an ownership group around us, a group of investors that have diverse and expertise in kind of all the key sectors, one of whom you mentioned is the Monarch Collective. We were their first investment. Probably many of you are very familiar with the Monarch Collective, but first PE fund to raise a fund and direct it solely towards the women's sports space. So I guess this is how we thought about it, and I think we have, I guess now we closed the loan, we're building a stadium, we're launching the club. Actually, we're starting our first year in Gillette, so we're leveraging, other legacy infrastructure in our city, and I'm really, really excited about it.
And your first season is?
It's in March. We're going to launch 26
Amazing.
in Gillette. It's a great year, actually, to launch in Gillette. I mean, I wish we were launching in our permanent home. 27 will be the year that we're in our permanent home, but it's a great time to play in Gillette. The World Cup is coming to Boston. We'll have the best players, in the world in the sport. In our city, it'll be a summer of soccer in Boston, and will be, and obviously Gillette is certainly a world-class facility that our athletes that are new to Boston deserve to play in.
And when are your contractors saying your new stadium will be done?
In the 2027 season.
Amazing. Fingers crossed for that. That's great. Fran, we worked together on what we thought, and I know you thought was a strong bid, to bring the WNBA to Austin. And I'm curious, as throughout that process and as a result, have you become, as a former player, at all convinced that expansion of the major leagues has created a need for any new leagues or ecosystems for the players?
You just had to bring that up, didn't you? Just had to bring up
Austin
the Austin
hurts,
bid.
right?
Yeah, it hurts. It still hurts. No. And I didn't just think we had a strong bid. We had a super, super amazing bid with Mark Lazary and Jenny Just and Kevin Durant and myself as the core investors. And so it was a great time. Obviously, I've been in the WNBA since day one. I played for the Houston Comets on their first championship team. It's okay if you applaud for that. Yeah. And so I've been a day oneer from the WNBA and studied how the W does its business and candidly very close to the WNBA and understand the directions that they start to go for a lot of different reasons. So yes, we put up a great bid, but I also understood there was a possibility that the bids would go to the NBA owners and that we would have to do something else. But I was prepared for that. I have a board in my office that has a list of all the things that are not in women's sports, and a women's development league for basketball was obviously on that list. So for me, we're launching Exalt in June of 2026. There are 16,000 women playing basketball in this country, and thousands of them will have to retire at 23, and to me that's just despicable. It doesn't make sense for senior basketball players to have to retire. So we're launching Exalt, and it does meet the opportunity of pipeline for players to go to the WNBA to play internationally, but it also just gives women the opportunity to continue playing the sport they love. So didn't get the bid this time, but obviously looking forward to the opportunity to launching Exalt so that thousands of women can continue playing the sport.
I'm curious, what's your takeaway in terms of we didn't hit the bid? One of our problems was we didn't have and don't have an NBA team in Austin. How do you view the importance of the NBA infrastructure, ownership groups? Obviously, Mark Lazary owned a significant piece of the Bucks, so we had an NBA owner in the cap table. what do you think differentiates?
Yeah, when media would ask me what I thought our toughest competition is, they would bring up the independent cities, and those groups had tremendous bids: Nashville, Kansas City, and others. And I felt that Austin was still the best. But I also always said that the NBA franchises were our toughest competition. So when they said, "Well, who do you think it is? You think it's Nashville? You think it's?" I go, "No, it's." If the NBA owners want WNBA teams, they are going to be our biggest competition. And as it turns out, that was exactly true. So the infrastructure, candidly, the confidence in their operations, Adam Silver knows these guys. He knows their operations, a level of confidence, a level of assurance that they're going to be run properly. I think it's very important for Adam Silver and Kathy. So, yeah, that's one of those things you can't help. You can't help that you're not an NBA city, but you can have an attractive bid that it creates all the other elements that are essential to having a winning bid and a winning situation in Austin as well.
Teresa, you are in an NBA city. The NBA is expanding internationally, Europe next, as we know. Toronto will represent the W's first international expansion. And I'm curious how you're approaching, specifically the fact that this is the first franchise out of the U.S. In terms of building the business, developing fans, both locally as well as globally, and how you might distinguish an international city from, another U.S. city.
Yeah, we felt very, very lucky and privileged to be able to be awarded a team in 2024. And from the very beginning, it was never Toronto's team, it was Canada's team. And that went all the way back to when we first started talking to the league about this team. Our commercial agreement is that we have the entire country of Canada as marketing territory, which is very different than every other team in the league. And we've positioned it as Canada's team from the beginning. And that was taken. I spent 10 years with the Raptors and as vice president of basketball operations and working very closely with our business side. And we purposely did preseason games every year across the country. And we laid the groundwork so that when we did win on the court, we had the entire country behind us. And the Blue Jays very much did the same thing in the 90s. So you have these two teams, the Raptors and the Blue Jays, that truly are Canada's team from coast to coast. But what we get to do is we get to do that from the very beginning, right? The Raptors had the Grizzlies, the Blue Jays had the Expos, but from the very beginning, we are planting our seed as Canada's team. Just this last weekend, we were in Montreal doing community clinics, activations, talking to basketball leaders, learning my French. I know none. But Tempo, the name itself, we very purposely made it a name that was the same in English and French. Our French fans, Francophone Canadians, have never been spoken to directly. And it's a lot of work on our end. Some of those things you don't quite understand your undertaking until you're in the middle of it. We had to make 2 websites, right? We don't have the bandwidth, we're a startup. So how do you get those things done? But it's really, really important to position this team as that. And as you said, it's not just Canada either, it's global. In the latest census within Canada, nearly 1 out of every 4 people identify as a new Canadian, meaning that they weren't born there, they identify with a different country. And we know that about 1/4 of our fans are new Canadians. So those people, the world is getting smaller and smaller, so their closest family members aren't living in Canada, they're living somewhere else, and they're talking to them every single day about their new favorite team, which we want to be the Tempo. And that's how you build a league globally. And I know that the panel before us, we were sitting over there listening, and they're talking about media rights. And yes, media rights drives these leagues. If you don't have a media deal, look at the WNBA. The latest one we just did, what's connected to the NBA, is going to create a windfall for everybody that's part of it. But what's even better is because we exist now in Canada, for the first time ever, there's going to be a Canadian broadcast deal. Who knows what it's going to be, but it's going to exist, and it's only going to go from there. I think that was a huge driving force in the NBA becoming global as a dream team, and then from there, all those media deals starting. So this is just the very beginning, and we're really excited. The Tempo is really excited to kind of start that trajectory to really bring this incredible league. Like you said, Fran, you were there at the beginning. It's been incredible since the beginning, but now more people need to know about it, and we really look forward to really branching it, not just in Canada, but globally.
I'm curious, you mentioned it's Canada's team. When we think of America's team, a lot of us think of, love them or hate them, the Dallas Cowboys, because they've branded themselves and as America's team. Did you recognize it's the NFL, but did you take away any lessons from that? Is there anything that they have done in your mind?
I have to say, I haven't done a deep dive in the Dallas Cowboys yet. But what we have looked at, but what we have looked at is the growth of basketball specifically across Canada. And what we've looked at, I mean, that's the reason why you're in Montreal. So you look across the country, and girls basketball participation is growing the fastest in Quebec. Like, we need to have a presence there. We need to make sure that they feel that this is their team as much as anybody who lives in Ontario or British Columbia. And, all that information, the data that we have, we're trying to use it to shape it, understanding where people are purchasing our merchandise. The ticket sales, like, Toronto's going to be our home, but we just announced games in Vancouver next regular season. We're going to play games across the country, because if you can see it, you can be it. Like, that's so true. And we did activations around the WNBA game that was there this year. It was Seattle versus Atlanta. Incredible game. Went down like that. Game was really meaningful, which is very different from the preseason games that I was part of with the Raptors. So all that to say, no, maybe we should look at the Dallas Cowboys and see how they became America's team. But we're looking at a lot of fan data. We're looking at basketball growth, and also what the purchasing power of the people and the viewership is telling us as well.
Amazing. We all watched the Valkyries this year, and for any of you, incredible season, sold out 22 home games, set WNBA attendance records, and made the playoffs in their first year.
Yeah, set the bar high, right? We got to follow that. But we look forward to. I think that's what we're going to try to do too. Like, I want to say a different way. Like, we want to sell out. We want to make the playoffs. We want to do all those things too. But every team that enters this league has to raise the bar. And the Valkyries did that, and we're going to do that. And it's great because every team wants that. Like, the biggest thing I'm thankful for is the WNBA community that I became part of. Every single president picked up my call. Everybody understands that we grow together, and it's been incredibly part of that. Jess has been huge, not just her, but her whole team, and we are paying that forward. Talk to the people at Cleveland, the people in Philadelphia, all these people that are coming behind us, and anything we can do to help them, we're here to do, because we know that together we're so much stronger.
Jennifer, Fran, any other takeaways from what the Valkyries did right this past season? Winning helps. Winning always helps, and as we've seen from the Patriots over the years, perhaps not as much recently, winning certainly contributes to a lot of the business metrics improving, including certainly valuation. Any other takeaways from their first season and how you guys might model your activities in 27, 26?
Well, I think one of the phenomenal things that we've seen with the Valkyries is the way they've built their brand. They launched that brand out of the gate incredibly successfully. And I can speak to when you launch out of the gate perhaps less successfully. I'm sure a lot of you are aware that, we came out of the gate with well-intentioned, but missed the mark. And, like...
You shouldn't have called yourself the Valkyries.
Well, I mean, I'm proud to say that, I think we've landed in a really phenomenal place with the brand, and it took some listening and engaging a broader stakeholder base. And the good news story of it was that we really uncovered the incredible passion for this club that hadn't even launched yet in the city of Boston, but also how important it is that you surround yourself with the right advisors, and now in that exercise. We put together a sort of brand advisory board, and we really, the first time around, we were really concerned about confidentiality and certainly did a bunch of work. But, the next time around, we were like, okay, we got to go broader. We got to bring in, players. We got to bring in, all different stakeholders. We're still doing that. We have an athlete advisory board where we've asked some iconic former retired and current athletes that come from our market. We got Sam Mewis and Allison Feaster and Aaliyah Boston and Christine Lilly. So, just how important it is to bring a lot of different voices in the room. But I think you also mentioned something really important. It's about the winning. I mean, and you know, in Boston, we need a win. I mean, there's a lot of pressure because in Boston, we've got a bunch of other teams that have been very, very successful. So on the sporting side, you know, we've been thinking about that from day one. You know, we hired a GM from Domeguash from FC Barcelona, one of the best women's clubs in the world. He, you know, hired right away our director of recruiting because, of course, we're also, you know, in our league, Boston and Denver, the first two, I think, North American professional teams that have to build a roster from scratch without any form of draft. So that's challenging. And his second hire was a director of recruitment, hired our coach from Portugal. I think she's the third female coach in the league. So, you know, on the sporting side, really leaning into the leadership that we need to build the sporting side. And I'd say, and again, you know, when you look at the Valkyries and Jess Smith and, you know, the phenomenal front office staff that they've put together, and we just recently announced our team president, Jennifer Van Dyke, who spent many years at Wasserman and IMG and then was at the NBA with the Clippers. So she brings, you know, decades of experience in the kind of sports, entertainment, digital space. My chief revenue officer came from the NFL, Amina Bowman, from the Commanders. My chief legal officer and COO came from Major League Baseball. So, you know, we're bringing in the talent, and I guess that circles back to the early story about just making sure that you hire right and build that sustainable long-term foundation, which I hope we're going to get it right.
Yeah, what I loved about the Valkyries is that they spoke it into existence day one. We are going to win by this time. We are going to do this, and everything that they said was going to happen has already happened. So for a league like mine that's obviously developmental, obviously less resources than the major leagues, the second thing that we'll take from that is how they made the team the communities, right? So from the beginning, the people in the Bay felt like this is our team. They didn't wait until it was time to sell tickets to make it their team. They made it their team for the logo, for the colors, for all those kinds of things. So it was just masterfully done. And I personally appreciate watching, because a lot of the magic of the Valkyries has nothing to do with money. It is all about their connection to their community, and it was beautiful, and I've loved watching it all season.
Teresa, we mentioned the Patriots in Boston. How are you using the existing, and you've been with several clubs in Toronto, how are you using the existing infrastructure of some of those clubs or the legacies that they've created in Toronto for purposes of your business and sports operations?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the first things I mentioned was just Canada's team, like what the Blue Jays and the Raptors have done specifically to become the country's team, Jurassic parks across the country. Like, we're taking that playbook and applying it to the Tempo 100%. Understanding the Canadian fans and how they have extreme loyalty. They will not necessarily be the most boisterous. I think the fan bases, you can contrast it. I mean, with the playoffs, going with the Raptors going to a Philadelphia 76ers, a Cleveland Cavaliers game, the fan base there versus in Scotiabank Arena was very, very different. The other infrastructure that I'm really excited about is that in the last 3 years, professional women's sports has appeared in Canada. So we always had the Canadian Open in golf, as well as the National Bank Open in tennis. But the PWHL launched in 2024, and the NSL launched in this year in 2025, Northern Super League in soccer, and we will launch in 2026. It's literally the first time ever that women's sports in a team way has been professionalized in the country of Canada. So we are leaning on each other a lot, and I think together we're creating an incredible momentum in the country that has never ever been seen before. So we're learning a lot, but it's great to have some partners in crime in it. Actually, PWHL Scepters, Toronto Scepters, and the Toronto Tempo will share Coca-Cola Coliseum. This may not be a fact, but I'm pretty sure we might be the only professional sports organizations, hockey and basketball, to share the same space. So that space, Coca-Cola Coliseum, is owned by the city, operated by Maple Leaf Sports Entertainment, the parent company of the Raptors and the Blue Jays. But then it was built 100 years ago, actually, for the Royal Agricultural Fair. So they're the first tenant. And then also Canadian National Exhibition, which is a local, it's kind of like a state fair. If you've ever been to the Minnesota State Fair or Texas State Fair, it's kind of like that. So they host it every 2 years. So all that to say, we have a lot of partners, which can be very, very tricky. But that also means there's a lot of people on side that want you to win. So if we can all get together, there's a lot of infrastructure that we can lean on. So all that to say, I think Canada as a country is very progressive. I'm American. I moved there in 2013 and have been searching for the soul of Canada ever since. And what I've found is that in the same way that in America, if you work hard enough, you can always live and have a belief that you can have the American dream. In Canada, it's all about being fairness. And everybody, people stand in queues and they want to bring along everybody. They want to bring everybody with them. And it's this overarching kind of like fairness and equity that permeates the culture there that I'm lucky enough to call my own now as a dual citizen. And it's something that we're also leaning on heavily with as we grow these women's sports organizations, not just the Tempo, but across all sports, because it's something that really taps into the culture of all Canadians.
Well, it looks like we're about to get the Oscars music, so I want to thank each of our panelists for their insights as they navigate these new challenges. Thank you to Sportico for having this panel, and we'll move on to the next.